Disney's Snow White hasn't even been in theaters for a full week yet, but already they've given up. We knew that this was going to be a nightmare for years in the build-up to Snow White. We knew it was going to be a failure. We just didn't know how bad. Well, it's the biggest disaster they've ever seen for any of these live-action remakes. The worst opening weekend they've had at $86 million worldwide, and a movie that's set to lose hundreds of millions of dollars for the company. And now Disney, before the movie even has a second weekend at the box office, they are already throwing Rachel Zegler under the bus. Disney blaming Rachel Zegler for Snow White disaster. And look, Rachel Zegler does deserve a shit ton of blame for this entire thing. However, when you look at what Disney decided to do by casting her, not because she was the best person for the role and because she had all this experience, but instead because they wanted to brag about how diverse and inclusive they were by having a Latina Snow White, parading her out, bragging about that, because they so wholeheartedly changed the message of this story. The decision to have the CGI dwarves. A lot of these things are Disney's doing as well, but there is no doubt that Rachel Zegler and her actions tanked this movie 2 years before it came out in theaters. And this all comes from an article that was put on Variety yesterday, revealing a lot of the inside details about Snow White, confirming a lot of the things that we suspected, that it was pretty obvious to tell that they did and that we knew, but now we have people starting to speak out about this. Inside Disney's Snow White fiasco, death threats, beefed up security, and a social media guru for Rachel Zegler. Why don't we just get into this? And look, there's some people that are not happy at all about this report coming out, about this article coming out, because they're saying, you're trying to say that Rachel Zegler did all this. She didn't do anything wrong. You're just blaming her. No, Rachel Zegler did a fuck ton wrong. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. But there's no doubt that Rachel Zegler, if you could point to one singular person, it is her to blame for all of the negativity surrounding this movie. On August 12th, 2024, 3 days after Rachel Zegler hit the stage at Disney's D23 fan event to introduce the first official trailer of Snow White, she thanked supporters in an X post for driving the teaser to 120 million views in 24 hours. 1 minute later, she added an afterthought in the same thread. And always remember, Free Palestine. And, keep in mind, this is, she tweeted the trailer out, and then, after 24 hours, and it got all these impressions. Rachel Zegler did thank everybody. Thank you so much for the love and the 120 million views in our trailer promoting Disney's Snow White. Failed to mention it had 1.5 million dislikes, only 100,000 likes. One of the worst received trailers we've ever seen in history. Weird that she ignored that. And then she did attach that on the end. And always remember, Free Palestine. Now, you have to remember what was going on when this happened, right? Some backlash towards her co-star, Gal Gadot, who is Israeli. And look, people are going to have their own political opinions. In actors in Hollywood, they're going to have their feelings one way or the other. We usually know where they tend to land. But attaching this message to the promotion of your movie with your Israeli co-star might not be the best look, and that's where this article starts. The addendum, which amassed 8.8 million views, nearly 4 times the number of the initial post, quickly made the rounds, with many inside the studio expressing shock that the Snow White star would commingle the promotion of its $270 million tentpole with any kind of political statement. Well, clearly you didn't know who this person was. You couldn't muzzle her the entire time until the last few months, as we get down to this. A Disney executive raised the studio's concerns with Zegler's team, while the film's producer flew to New York to speak directly with her. But the actress, whose relationship with the studio began to unravel in 2022 during a contentious West Side Story Awards season campaign and continued as she trashed the beloved original Snow White, stood her ground, and the post remained. Behind the scenes, and when I first saw this, death threats, beefed up security, I thought they meant for Rachel Zegler. They meant for Gal Gadot. That's who got the beefed up security. That's where the death threats were. I guess not necessarily a surprise. Behind the scenes, death threats towards Zegler's co-star Gal Gadot, who is Israeli, spiked, and Disney had to pay for additional security for the mother of 4. She didn't understand the repercussions of her actions as far as what it meant for the film, for Gal, for anyone, says one insider. 3 months later, following the presidential election, Zegler posted "fuck Donald Trump" and made Trump supporters never know peace on Instagram. And we talked about this when this happened, this long, lengthy post about Rachel Zegler. I hope Trump supporters and Trump himself never knows peace. F Donald Trump. All of that stuff. She also said a few days before that, if you vote for Trump, I don't want you coming to my movie. And again, I think all these people, they're free to have whatever political opinions that they want. When you're attaching all of this to the promotion of your movie that already has so much negativity surrounding it, probably a retarded thing to do. But that's who Rachel Zegler is, and that's what she did. Disney had had enough, given the Star Wars signaling to half the potential audience of an already troubled film plagued by costly reshoots to stay home. Platt made the case, so the producer, again to Zegler. After a back and forth, she began working with a social media guru paid for by Disney to vet any posts before the film's March 21st bow. Disney declined comment. Zegler did not respond to a request for comment. And I will also remind everybody that a day or two after this post, right, this post from her telling Trump supporters to fuck off, she put out what clearly was a copy-paste apology because it wasn't written the way she writes. It was capitalized. She never capitalizes anything when she writes on Instagram. I said at that point, it's clear someone else wrote this for her and she copy-pasted. Well, now we know that that is true. That's exactly what happened with this social media guru. Now the film's dismal opening weekend in the rearview mirror, Burbank brass are evaluating what went wrong. To put Snow White's global box office haul into perspective, it's about $34 million less than Joker 2 in October, but with a bigger budget by about $70 million. You can't say a live-action remake of the most iconic film in the vault that cost $270 million, has been reshot multiple times, opening to $50 million is okay. The math does not work. That movie should be a $1 billion movie. That's what they were hoping. That's probably what it needs to get close to breaking even. But instead, it's going to be a multi-$100 million loss. The Disney Zegler standoffs underscore the challenge Hollywood studios face as they attempt to rein in stars who court controversy on social media. For her part, Godot kept her comments on geopolitics limited to offering support for the civilian hostages taken during the Hamas attack and did not mix that message with the promotion of the film. And that is the thing that I think is important. In this day and age, the idea that no actor or actress is ever going to voice any type of political opinion about anything ever, I don't know if that's realistic with how much it's in your face all the time. But you have to keep that separate from whatever movie you're doing. If Gal Gadot started posting on Instagram or social media, trailers of the movie, following and intermixed with messages of whatever she wants for Israel at the time, that wouldn't go over very well, right? Because you're inserting this political message one way or the other, regardless if you disagree or not, into the promotion of your movie, which you should be trying to get the most amount of people possible to. So Gal Gadot was a little more professional when it does come to that, regardless of whether you agree with her or not. Zegler had already strained nerves at both the studio and Spielberg's Amblin partners when she complained on social media. I forgot about this. When she complained on social media that she wasn't invited to the 2022 Oscars as the star of the Best Picture nominee West Side Story. Because she was shooting Snow White at the time. They needed her to shoot Snow White, so the studio didn't essentially let her leave while they were in the middle of shooting. So she complained on social media to publicly pressure them into inviting her there. And that's what we saw happen. Rachel Zegler's entitlement all the way back in 2022. And then they go and they replay, a bunch of the stuff we already know, what she said on the red carpet at D23 about Snow White, how she bashed the original, how so many different groups of people were upset with this. But yeah, like how Disney tried to save Snow White by silencing Rachel Zegler. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. If they would have started maybe 2 years ago, maybe it could have had an impact. Maybe it could have saved at least the opening weekend for this movie. But the truth is, as much as you have insiders from Disney throwing her under the bus, Disney's decision to bastardize the story of Snow White, completely change the messaging, right? Cast Latino Rachel Zegler so they can brag about how woke and inclusive they are, getting rid of the dwarves to replace them with CGI abominations. A lot of these decisions were Disney's and Disney's alone. Rachel Zegler made this into a colossal worldwide disaster. But Disney's decisions probably guaranteed the film never would have been a success, even if Rachel Zegler had done all of the right things. It's a combination of the worst PR you could possibly have with a retarded idea for a movie. And now here we are. What do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comment section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.